And it's like, what a perfect storm.
Yeah.
To create a lot of dysfunction at this level of the organization that probably is the least well respected and the most important. Like this is truly where work lives or dies. And yet in most organizations, it is dying. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm Rodney Evans, and that guy with the weirdly lit up office room. I can't, you started it.
I don't know what's going on.
Today is Sam Spurlin.
Hey Rodney, do you know the song Zombie by the Cranberries?
Of course.
This morning, as I was preparing for this podcast, was just singing your name to that song over and over.
Why?
I don't know why, but it's real stuck in my head. And I'm not going to sing it, but really if you know the song, you know what I'm talking about. Zombie and Rodney, they go together.
Wow. I feel like that's going to get in my head now. That's really fun.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Welcome back to At Work with the Ready. This is a podcast about the future of work and how it now is the present moment.
Sure is. Each episode, we turn our attention to one common organizational pattern that we think is worth digging into. We pull it apart like a fruit roll-up left in the sun and propose solutions for what to do instead.
I love fruit roll-ups, man.
That's so good.
I haven't had a fruit roll-up in a minute. I will really want that right now. I love how they gave us that stuff, and it was basically like really flavored sugar plastic. Mm-hmm. Wrapped in plastic, and we were just like nom nom nom, let's put it on our fingers.
And the fact that you could like punch out shapes and stuff, like really just get your fingers all over this sticky fruit leather.
So gross. And like what is that stuff made of? I don't know. So this week I'm excited like every time, but I am really excited. We're going to talk about a particular strata of the organization this week. And that strata is the team below the leadership team. That could be the team below the C-suite or the team below like the HRLT, but it's the one layer below because we've noticed some very interesting things that happen at that layer. But before we do, Sam is going to check us in.
Rodney, check-in question this week. What is one of your favorite low-tech work hacks?
I don't even know what that means. Go first.
I'll go first. For me, index cards. I keep a stack of blank index cards on my desk, and I will just grab one willy-nilly and take all my notes on index cards. And I will use them to like hold my weekly outcomes that I'm like shooting for so I can keep it in front of me. Or if I'm just going to like do a quick brain dump on a project, it's nice to do just on an index card. So I'm not into notebooks, but I am into just having index cards everywhere. Because then you could throw them away at the end too. And it feels good.
Yeah,
just sure get out of here. I'm done with this.
Okay. My low-tech hack is when I'm trying to figure something out or learn something new, I put something related to it on my wall right here. Okay. And then lots of times during the day, this happened with depth finding, it happened with future of HR stuff. Right now it's happening with unwork related. I haven't mounted this yet. It's just here, but this is a music theory chart that I'm learning slowly. It's a lot of math. Anyway, I just feel like I, by osmosis, have whatever is right here sort of like running in the back of my brain until it gets fully processed.
Love that.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about this level of leadership, which I don't know if we've ever really done this before, except to talk about like a leadership team. We've never said like in an organization, we're going to talk about this group in particular. And I find this group like very compelling to work with and also just to talk about. So there's this level of leadership below a leadership team, one down. Doesn't have to be from the C-suite, as I said. This level is seen as the translation layer between strategy and execution, often. But just as often, it becomes like kind of this black hole where strategy goes to die. And so there's both a sense that there's a ton of potential energy in this group that isn't sort of tapped into, and also a sense that that group is doing too much of too many things and therefore not really having great outcomes. And so there's just sort of this like weird pull on this group that seems to ultimately make them not perform the way that they might. And so that is what we're going to talk about today, how we sort of break out of this unfortunate cycle.
I think one of the reasons why we haven't necessarily talked about this before is that I think it's actually difficult to basically, this group looks very different across lots of different organizations. I'm thinking about, the 100,000 person organization as compared to the 5,000 person organization. And this
Sure.
group looks quite different, I think, across those. But we're going to just roll with what we've described so far with the hope that you can either see yourself, because I think a lot of folks who listen to this podcast are actually part of that
I do
group.
too.
So this is not going to be a flame fest. Not that we ever do that. I think, there's a lot of empathy that I am bringing to the folks in this position, because in many ways they are put in a system that is almost impossible to be extremely successful in.
These are almost always my favorite people in a client.
They're
Like I
both ends
often
for
work
me.
at the
The most
leadership team
frustrating
level.
people and the
Yeah,
most fun people to
they're the
work
most fun. I often work at the leadership team level, and often when I get to know their directs, I'm like, oh, this is
This is where it's
where
at.
the stuff is. Um,
Yeah.
so Sam, where do you want to start? Why don't you walk us into this?
I think a good place to start is let's explore why does this group why did it even come up for us as we're thinking about things to talk about? And I think about a couple of different projects that I've worked on where I have seen things like, hey, we're getting the extended leadership team together. Not really with a super clear sense of why they are going to come together, but there's a sense that this is a team supposedly, and therefore we should be doing some stuff together. And that is an interesting a thing to dig into. I think this
Mm,
feeling that this group should be doing something, but we're not really sure what.
yeah, totally. I think that's right. I also think something that I see that's very, very common, and this is going to be spicy, but sometimes I think that like the leadership, the top team, sort of like the first team, gets to maintain their own superficial harmony, like on the backs of these people.
Oh, for
So like
sure.
they show up to just like high five each other at retreat and be like, let me just tell you all about all the great work in my organization, and like pat each other on the back and like maintain like, you know, I'm not going to necessarily call it toxic positivity because it's not always toxic, but it's not honest. It's not like
Yeah.
honest textured positivity. It's like it's comfortable. It's comfortable positivity. And then one click below is where the shit is hitting the fan. And where you have
Yeah.
people who are like, we don't have the resources to do that. I hate that guy. This guy just shows up and says like that this is his decision, but clearly it's not. Like this is where when you see the very typical like triangles in organizations that fail, whether it's like, you know, sales, marketing, and like product, or whether it's like legal, HR, and finance. Like there are these typical sort of triads where there's a lot of conflict, and usually it's at this level. A lot of times
Yeah.
at the top level, everything's like sunshine and ice cream, and then one level below where execution is meant to be happening, things stall because of how this group basically, to your point, doesn't work as a group. They don't conceive of themselves as a cross functional team. They conceive of themselves as the catchers of the work being delegated to them, and then the
Yeah.
managers of the work under them. And like that has nothing to do with horizontal collaboration or peer based like cooperation.
Yeah, this is a function of, most organizations that we work with being pretty traditional in the sense of some flavor of command and control hierarchy.
Sure. Totally.
Whether, there's variations within that structure, but generally, as you move up in the organization, you have a concentration of power and authority. And the disagreements that exist at the very top of the organization can be worked through in kind of like one-on-one conversations. Like
Yeah.
me and you both represent, we're on the C-suite team in this example. We both represent a huge concentration of power, and the quibbles that we have, we can like work through one-on-one, but actually underneath each of us is this huge pyramid of power that has been concentrated in us. So the thing that is just a little quibble that we are able to work through one-on-one actually radiates out in this way, in a way that like creates waves into the rest of the organization. And I don't know how many times you've seen, or I've seen, small little like disagreements or a certain phrase that happens in a C-suite or very senior team meeting, and it radiates out into the organization, and like I heard this, and which means this, and now we've got to go do this. And it I don't. It's like, just, I guess the word that keeps coming to mind is it radiates and amplifies as you go down the organization. So of course, the folks who are kind of like the first to receive that have lot placed on them.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned this. I before like in a past life, I did quite a bit of work with co-founders of high growth startups when I
Yeah,
was a solopreneur. And I used to say that, like, they often, the central sort of existential conflict between co-founders, or it also applies to the executive team, would be carried out in a million civil wars throughout the organization. And it's
yeah,
like whatever sort of like the main problem was at the top, the battles actually get fought somewhere else. And I think there are a lot of really logical reasons for that. So if I'm going to use HR because I know them the best and I work with them a lot. If I'm an HR leader who reports into a CHRO, let's say I'm the head of talent and there's a head of all the other things. I am showing up to that executive team, presumably to make my organization look good and to represent our work well. When I'm going to turn around and talk to my leadership team, I am going to probably also try to represent us well. And also I want to like keep them in line to the extent that they don't make me look bad. Because when I go
yeah,
back to the top team, I want to have a great story and great results. And when I turn around to my team, what I don't want is them to be like, well, I actually think that the head of learning has a really good point here, and we should be doing what she says instead of what you do. Like, we just, I think it's a very understandable place for silos to really come to life, is
yeah,
at this team layer where we are meant to be executing across. All strategy is cross functional strategy. We've talked about it a million times. We're meant to really be executing across the cross functional strategies that were decided above us. But this is where the peer relationships break down. And our formal structure is vertical, and our compensation is vertical, and the power dynamic is vertical. And then the work to be done
yeah,
is horizontal. And it just gets borked like really
yeah.
fast.
Yeah, and you're speaking to the competition aspect that shows up to
Also, that.
even in organizations where like we all get along, and it's generally positive. If you're in a hierarchical organization and you want to keep moving up in it, there the math doesn't math super great. There are fewer and fewer positions that more and more folks are shooting for, and that creates dynamics and incentives and pressure that doesn't always encourage people to show up in their most collaborative, giving you the trusting that you have the best intentions of the organization or the team. It brings out some of the worst parts of our human nature, I think.
I think that's true. And I think that data bears this out. Like, I've seen, I mean, this is anecdata, but I bet there's research that backs this up. I've seen a number of 360s in my life as a coach where the score from peers on a leadership team like this is markedly lower than the scores from the executive above or the functional team that they run. And it's like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? That like your boss thinks you're great. The people who report to you would follow you into a fire, and your peers would like you to die in that fire. Like, what is going on? What is going on here? And I do think that some of it is competition.
Rough.
I know, but like like the most vicious relationships that I have seen or been part of in my own career have been these kind of peer-to-peer relationships on a leadership team. I also think that this layer doesn't necessarily understand what their peers do super well. And so I think it's easy when you're trying to collaborate across, like say that you're HR and you're trying to collaborate with finance to do budgeting
Yeah.
work, to do AI experiment, whatever. Like finance doesn't know what HR does really, and nor do they care, if we're being
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
And so I think it is there when you layer the explicit forces that I just mentioned around power and comp and structure and verticality. And then you mention like the competitive nature of this and how people get promoted and what they get promoted based on. And then you add to that the fact that when I reach across horizontally, I probably don't really know with a lot of nuance what my peer does. And I'm probably going to assume that it's not as important and hard as what I do. Like if we're
Of
being
course.
honest. And it's like, what a perfect storm
Yeah.
to create a lot of dysfunction at this level of the organization that probably is the least well respected and the most important. Like, this
Yeah.
is truly
Yeah.
where work lives or dies. And yet, in most organization, it is dying.
Yeah. Why do you say it's the most important?
I think in the at the top team level, you know, that group's work, which we've talked about many times on this show, really should be about sensing externalities and living more in the future and setting vision and strategy. And, you know, I think we'd love to see all C-suites or all top teams in a function living a year or two in the future, not in the present. And then
Mhm.
I think whatever is being clarified sort of sunshine zone level by that team is going to get translated either well or poorly by this group that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if the first move out of the gate is this group is interpreting the larger strategy or the larger vision, um, you know, through a silo, through the lens of a silo, through the lens of competition, through the lens of zero sum, through the lens of um, peer based angst, like you're already in trouble.
Yeah.
And you know, in traditional hierarchy, this is obviously not true in self-managing companies, but we're talking about like the majority of companies out there. If that group is fucked, like the people below them just like don't have a prayer. It's just
Yeah.
like then you're basically you're delegating the dysfunction of that layer to the rest of the organization. Like then the rest
Yeah.
of the function or the rest of the company is now triaging your lack of clarity and collaboration and ability to do shit cross functionally. Now you are placing that burden on them to overcome what is your broken operating system.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. What I'm realizing here is I'm thinking about, why or in what ways is a traditional hierarchy different and worse than a kind of more self-managing organization? And what you just said, I think that I'm going to say in a slightly different way, is that we are looking to this group and other kind of middle leadership to replicate what a self-managing organization does naturally,
That's
at least a
right.
well-functioning one. All of that
That's smart.
coordination and that transfer of information and knowledge that can happen kind of team to team in a self-managing organization. In some ways, this interstitial group is trying to do that in a very structured, more hierarchical way of working together.
I think that's right, Sam. And like to put a fine point on it, you know, we see we see cases in the news of very progressive organizations that just fire these people because they think that they're creating
Get rid of
sludge.
all the
So like
managers.
just get rid of, we get rid of all the managers. Like, I think Basecamp published something about this fairly recently. Hire sort of famously fired like 10,000 managers when they moved to micro enterprises. And that's one way to do it. But I think to your point, in a perfect world, this is where a lot of OS work should actually happen. Like this
Right.
is where the routines and the structures and all of the Twilight Zone stuff should be architected by this group, really. Like
Yeah.
the C suite, like whatever, they have work to do. They have to hold the space for it. We want them doing the moves too. But like this is where it comes to life because this is like hands on keyboards, boots on ground. And I think to me, there's on one end the current state, which is we'll just call them middle managers, even though obviously that's a larger
Upper
swath of
mid,
the
but yeah.
organization that we're talking about. But still, this group is sort of caught between doing work themselves, leading work for others, and then covering ass when they are talking to their boss. Like this is the CYA group, right? That like doesn't want to look bad. So they get really managed down to because they are the delegates. And then they get really managed up to by their organization who wants their approval and permission and support and coaching and blah, 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 blah. And so basically my mental model for this is like, they're just full-time triage. Like this layer
Yeah.
is just full-time triage. And what I would prefer to see, rather than just saying, fire them all, we don't need to triage, what I would prefer to see is that they're doing the work of working on the system rather than working in the system and just like trying to firefight all the time. But I think that's pretty uncommon. I don't know if I've like ever, I guess in a couple of projects, I've seen them expressly have that remit, but usually it hasn't happened until we've been hanging out for a while and realized that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a client right now that we're working with who pulled together their, I think they call it their extended leadership team.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to talk about it. The ELT is what I most commonly hear.
ELT, I'm
that
a
can
little
also
bit
be
of
executive leadership.
executive. Yeah. EMLT, I think in this case, because it's a marketing organization. So extended marketing leadership, which they should do it the other way around and then it'd be MELT. But anyway,
nice.
Pulling together this group for them though. So it's like 25-ish, I think, people who kind of represent that layer right below the marketing leadership team, and pulling them together for a full day offsite to do a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, to like think about what should we be doing, and what they ended up doing. And I don't remember, I was not involved with this. This was kind of like our insider on the client side running the show on this. But they essentially spun up like 3 mission-based teams to go work on OS stuff that was cross-functional and was nobody's individual responsibility.
Great.
And I think there's I don't think it's universal that everybody on this team thinks that that is what they should be thinking about or working on, but they have enough of a critical mass, enough of those folks who see this work as important that they can go off and do this MBT work and then come back together as a group, maybe once a quarter, to share out what the MBTs have done, incorporate some of that stuff into just the OS in general, and maybe spin up some new ones. So I know we're shading into like what to do instead, but that's what where my brain goes when I think about how do you work with this group of folks who do have power in the organization and do really understand how the work gets done, which is sometimes what we're missing in C-suites, if we're being honest, or very senior leadership teams. So in some ways, it's the best of both worlds. And I think that's a particularly adaptive, I think, example of an organization trying to use this group.
I think that's really wise. I have seen similar things where the extended leadership team has gotten together, realized what sort of organizational tension or dysfunction they had in common, and then swarmed around it in subgroups with really good effect. Like probably significantly better than either all of them trying to do something together, which never works because it
Yeah.
is usually too big of a group,
Too big. Yeah.
or assigning it to one of them and being like, you got
That's
the ball
rough.
now. Like
Yeah.
it's your work stream.
Yeah.
Like that always goes sideways.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
So, Rodney, what I just laid out seems so coherent and smart and good. And why doesn't just every organization do this as a default? Like, what else might be going on?
You do seem coherent today, Sam. It's nice to see you just like fully lucid on this podcast.
Nice change.
It's a nice change of pace. Yeah. So there's something I've been thinking about a lot, especially around AI usage, but like also because of what's happening in the world right now and the ways in which our social safety net is getting like larger and larger holes in it. And that's really some consideration around like how generations map to the workforce. And what I mean by that is, I'm a geriatric millennial, is I think the common term, Gen Y-ish. And my generation and Gen X, the one older than me, like we are considered the sandwich generation right now. And the reason for that is because the boomers, because of changes in the world, changes in sort of the contract between workers and organizations that hit them really badly. Like there's just a lot of data that those people are staying in the workforce longer. They're relying on my generation for financial support, emotional support, to live in multi-generational houses, et cetera, in a way that like their parents did not rely on them.
I've heard this be called the boomer blockade.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Well, it's interesting, the blockade word, because there's also part of it, which is like, because they stay in the workforce, they're creating a cap on like our upward mobility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there more in the blockade thing? Because I've never heard that
No,
expression.
I
That's really
think it's
interesting.
basically that boomers are working longer and therefore not relinquishing leadership positions that would ostensibly be going to, Gen Xers, Gen Yers.
Totally. So there's that part of it at work, and then there's the financial and emotional responsibility for many, many people. I mean, I certainly like know tons of my peers who are, when I look at the difference between our relationships with our parents and our parents' relationships with our grandparents, it is like night and day. And then at the same time, you have Gen X and Gen Y parents who are raising kids who are not launching and who are staying home, and living at home and staying dependent and staying reliant, which in my opinion, we could talk a lot about parenting and other things, but there are
You and I
societal.
are obviously the two people best
We're gonna
suited
have
to
a
talk
podcast
about
about parenting, just you and I, that are just like finger wagging.
two childless folks.
Everybody wants to hear us talk about this, but I think like parenting considerations aside,
Yeah.
cost of living adjustments and wages just have not
Wild.
kept up
Yeah.
for
No.
that generation. Like they're coming out of school with the kind of debt that we didn't have. There are not the job opportunities that we had when we were coming out of school. The starting salaries for things are not anywhere near what they would need to be to live in most even like B or C list cities. So like the kids are like not all right in terms of like the viability of their economic opportunity. And so then you have this group of us between that are probably some combination of responsible for our parents and responsible for our kids and responsible for ourselves. And I say this because I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of AI. And the truth is like it's coming for us. I just, I think I don't like to be doomsday. I'm very excited about the promise of AI, and I spend a lot of my time there. But like, whereas the financial crisis of 2008 really heavily impacted blue collar and lower wage workers, now like this next significant phase shift in work is going to hit knowledge workers. Like it's already hitting consultants and software engineers and lawyers, and like it's going to be not the 10% who are exceptional in their field, but the 90% of the rest. And I say this as backdrop because this group of people, this extended leadership team, is almost all Gen X and Gen Y. And because of the pressure that's not even inside the organization, because of this broader pressure that I'm describing, I think we have seen this generation really work to uphold the status quo and to protect themselves because there is an outsized amount of dependence on them. And yet, I am worried that if this broad group is not the transformation layer in organizations, we will be the worst off, actually.
Yeah. Dang. That's that it's a good reminder that because we work in organizations, I'll speak for myself because I am working in organizations, my frame of reference is often the organization,
Sure.
which obviously dealing with
Yeah.
complexity and the sky and everything that we've talked about, there's so many forces going on that are outside the walls of the organization that help to inform what we are seeing within the organization. I think this is an astute observation.
It's just a thing that I'm paying attention to because I think it's going to be easy as AI moves from like augmentation to automation to say that this strata of an organization isn't necessary. And I'm like, if we don't draw the map for this thing, if we're not the people who determine, to your point, what the AI OS is of our organizations, we're going to be the generation that is in trouble. And
Yeah.
that worries me. That worries me
Yeah.
because I see how many people in our client groups, in my friend group, in the world have two other generations relying on their paycheck.
Yeah. I think I should get some kudos for just sitting here and letting you keep saying we when I am squarely a millennial.
Oh, you are, aren't you? Well, fine. You're going to be fine.
It's
I
fine,
mean,
Rodney. You know what? We can be
it's
united
fine.
front on this.
But yes, it's important that the audience knows that Sam is younger than me. I think is the main takeaway from this conversation.
Obviously.
Obviously. So I don't know. My call to action as we move into what to do about this is just like for those of us who are feeling the sandwich, don't play defense. Start
Yeah.
to be the transformation layer of an org.
Yeah.
How should they
All
do that,
right.
Sam?
Well, I kind of already talked about my main idea in the anecdote that I was giving about that marketing team, but I think there is, and this is connected to the identity idea as well. There's an opportunity to bring this group together and figure out what that identity could be, other than we all report to the same person. Or we're all part of the same function. Is there a way to coalesce around something grander than that? And I think you wrote this one in our list here. So why don't you talk a little bit more about what you see as the getting a clear identity move here?
Just to say, like going on offense to say, the identity of this group is to bring cross functional strategy to life or something like that. So that it's not just like, I got a bunch of peers, I got nothing in common with them. I'll talk to them when I have to, but I'll stay in my lane. I think whatever coherent identity that extended leadership team can land on that
Yeah.
gets them out of just being like the triage dumping ground and into something that feels like they're carving out their dent on the organization is really positive. And having done this work with that group dozens of times, it's not that hard, actually. It's just a
Yeah.
conversation that they don't usually have.
Well, because they feel, I mean, we often start with, all right, what are the tensions happening in this OS? And this group, they know it, they
They
feel
know
it,
those.
they have a good sense of what the most important or most transformational tensions to solve would and could be. So
Yeah.
it's not, I agree, it's not necessary, it's not hard to get a kind of critical mass of them thinking about what if we spent even 10% of our time looking at our organization as a product that we can make better and that can
Yeah. I
result
love that.
in things that are less frustrating for us to have to deal with every single day. Even a
Yeah.
little bit of that shared identity in that shared space to do that work can go such a long way.
Look at our organization as a product. What a banger, Sam.
I don't think I can claim it 100%. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned Basecamp earlier because I think I may have taken that from Jason Fried.
Okay, well, I was gonna give you full credit. Well done, Jason.
Yeah.
That's so that like really slaps.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's really smart.
And what that looks like is what I described before. Like, get the group together for half a day, do some OS mapping, do some sense making about what might we want to actually change, get some groups spun up, small mission based teams to go actually try something in that domain and have this peer group hold each other accountable to actually bring something back, show progress, and yeah, I don't know. It's a rhythm that you can get into at that point.
What are some examples of MBTs at this level that you think this group could or should pursue? Just
So
as
I think,
ideas.
yeah. So I think it's highly contextual to the function. So I know in this marketing organization there are some workflows that are inherently cross-functional or just inherently kind of actually unknown right now. Like every time they have to do this thing, it is pulling teeth. It's like they've never done it before, and spinning up an MBT to say this thing that we do basically the same, like we do it over and over and over. It should go better than the way it currently is. Let's fix one workflow. I think is a
Mm.
very reasonable thing for a team to get after, because in the process of fixing that or documenting that, they're going to probably fix and make other things better too.
Okay, so an MBT around a workflow identifying specific friction points that happen between the silos and then unfrictioning them.
I think that is a reasonable one for sure, because that is looking at the OS of like, how does this workflow actually happen? Like, who has the decision? How does the work flow through it? Where does it generally get stuck? Kind of like that whole value mapping sort of exercise, and then fixing some of those bottlenecks. That's very specific OS work for this group.
I mean, I imagine a lot of people listening can think of like 5 of those. Like I can
Oh,
think of like
totally.
5 from client projects
Yeah.
that like I've been part of. And I wasn't thinking about it at the time through the lens of like, this is the extended leadership team. What are they going to do together? It was more like, this is why this cross-functional thing can't happen. So like we got to get these people around it, but like potato is the same
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah. I
That's
think
really
so.
interesting. I'm trying to think if I have any other specific MBTs off the top of my head that I should say right now.
Well, I think so. Another one potentially that this group has some decent control over is like some planning or strategy type process.
Sure.
So, to the extent that there is planning happening within that function or within that department, if it's not getting you exactly kind of what you need, or it feels too heavy or just like too theatrical, like figure out a way to do it better. Like, generally, that's not one entity's responsibility unless you have like a strategy function within that. And even in that case, I would say it shouldn't be exclusively that group's remit to define and own and make everybody do exactly what they want.
Yeah, I think that tracks. I have seen in more than one client, I've seen this level pursue an MBT around budgeting
Yeah.
and trying to get to some kind of coherent single or integrated budget. And I feel like that can be really, really interesting work. You know, I always like as much as I love to talk about like midnight zone stuff, and I feel like that's where I'm the smartest. I also feel like in any organization, when we're looking at design, my first question is always about money. I'm just like,
Yeah.
where is it? Where does it go? How much does it cost? Like that's just like it's kind of the first unsaid principle behind anything is like, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's coin operated in a system. That's why it's work. Any whoozle. I think that having a cross-functional mission-based team that's a subset of an extended leadership team that looks at, I mean, it's just another workflow, but it's like that looks
Yeah.
at how annual budgeting or quarterly budgeting gets done and what a unified process for doing that that's not like up, down, up, over, down, up, like
Yeah.
is a really cool is a really cool, not very sexy thing, but probably has really outsized impact.
Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Cool.
And I think if you have no idea where to start, most organizations would benefit from an exercise in visualizing the work. Like, how does this organization actually work? So many times that's like step zero of making anything better. And it's a surprising amount of work to actually try to visualize how this very convoluted and often quite complex thing that evolved from just happenstance, how it actually works.
I love that.
And this group is really well situated to do that because the really senior groups, they don't have enough detail. And the really kind of junior or frontline folks often only have the detail on their very narrow parts. And it's difficult then to like knit everything together. And this group should theoretically be able to knit it all together at a pretty high level of detail.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
I got one more.
One more. Hit us
Ask
with
me
it.
it.
Rodney, you got one more idea for us. One more for the road. What are you thinking about?
Okay. Hear me out. I really like that when we do chartering, and you can do a really lightweight charter with the extended leadership team, that there is a role that gets chartered that's just member of this team. Because one of the things that I think happens at this level is that people feel like they should stay in their lane. They feel like I'm the functional person from marketing or from finance. Like, what do I know about sales or customer operations? Like, I should just like bring the finance POV and then like keep my mouth shut. And I think that what I've seen work really well is having that, like, I am a member of this team, which is separate from when I'm wearing my finance hat.
Yeah.
What that member of the team role is meant to be. And sometimes it's meant to be like, help identify the workflows that we should make better. Sometimes it's like, come to an operating rhythm where we do retrospectives about our organization. But like one of the things that you can work in there that I've seen work really well, and I've actually done this with teams I'm on as well, is making explicit that we want people's perspective on the whole thing, not just their functional lane. And when everybody sort of agrees that, like, okay, as a member of this team, who is a leader in this organization, who has experience and expertise, who's probably really fucking smart, I am going to bring my perspective on work and on how things are going here and not just stay in my lane. I think if you don't clarify that and make it explicit and have everybody sort of sign up for it, it's a little awkward to do. Like, it's a little awkward to show up as the finance guy and like WTF HR. I mean, plenty of them do it, but like, it feels weird.
Yeah.
And
if you don't have the invitation, it feels presumptive to like have to do that.
Exactly. And then you also get into like equity considerations where, like, you know, some identities are going to be much more likely to dig into each other's shit than other ones. And so I just think making it clear that, like, you know, we can have roles that are like repping our functions. And what does that mean? And then we can have a role that's just like, you know, to participate in this team, I will hold the role of member of this team. And here's what that means. It's more than just being a representative of something.
Love that.
Dig.
All right. I think we've done the best we can today.
I think so.
I feel like I tried to bring my A game.
Low bar.
So
you did. You had
so did you, Rodney.
Game.
You brought your A+ game as well.
Thanks, Sam. This is a good time slot for us.
It is. I agree.
We're sparkly at 10 o'clock on Wednesdays.
Exactly. All right. You all know the drill. We're always looking for new topics for the show. So if you have an organizational pattern that you're having trouble changing, shoot us a note at podcast@theready.com.
Yeah, also really do it. I get LinkedIn notes from you guys that are like, someday I'm going to send in a pattern. Just do it. Like, it doesn't have to be good. If it's bad, we just won't talk about it. But we love getting them. And we won't think less of you.
Even if you send a bad one.
You know, I just found out the other day, Sam, that Travis, who works with us, had emailed Podcast at the Ready like way before he worked here. And apparently he and I had like a whole email interaction that I had no recollection of. So
Nice.
all that is to say, don't be shy about it because like we won't remember anyway, but we might use your thing and hopefully it'll be helpful to you. This show is engineered by Taylor Marvin and produced by our friend Jack Van Amberg. At Work with the Ready is created by the Ready, where we help organizations to change the way that they work. Thank you so much for listening.